Hey everyone, welcome back to the Surgeon Sunny Show, the podcast where we explore the intersection of medicine, leadership, and the relentless pursuit of saving lives. Today's episode is titled High Level Leadership with the CEO of NMDP, and I'm beyond grateful for this conversation. My guest is Miss Amy Ronneberg, the first female CEO in the 37-year history of NMDP, the organization formerly known as Be the Match. For those of you who might not know, NMDP runs the world's largest registry of bone marrow and stem cell donors. Over 42 million people have signed up to potentially save a stranger's life. When someone is diagnosed with leukemia, sickle cell disease, or other blood cancers and disorders, NMDP helps them find a matching donor. Without that match, many of these patients wouldn't survive. Ms. Ronneberg leads this incredible organization, a multi-million-dollar global nonprofit with over 1,500 employees and partnerships with transplant centers around the world. What I find so inspiring about Ms. Ronneberg is not just what she's accomplished, but how she's done it. She became the CEO in March 2020, right as COVID-19 was shutting down the world, and she had to figure out how to keep delivering life-saving stem cells to patients when borders were closing and flights were being canceled. Under her leadership, NMDP saved over 8,000 lives in a single year, more than ever before in the organization's history. Ms. Ronneberg, it is such an honor to have you on the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you, Sumish, for everything you do. You've made such a huge difference in saving lives already and bringing donors onto the registry and telling our story. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I just love what NMDP does and excited to just take it to the next level every day. So I'd love to frame today's conversation around healthcare leadership. You know, the
Sure.
decisions you've had to make, the lessons you've learned, and any advice you might have for young people like myself and our listeners who dream of making an impact in healthcare. So I'm super excited to learn from you.
Great. I'm excited for the conversation.
Awesome. So I'm going to start by talking about a really bold decision. In January 2024, you changed the name of NMDP from Be the Match, a name that so many people knew and loved, to NMDP. So for our listeners, that might sound pretty simple, but changing a brand that millions of people recognize is a huge deal. And I'd love to hear how you thought through that decision and what made you realize it was time for a change.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It was a really bold decision and as we stepped back, we saw several themes were consistently emerging, and one of them was we'd really outgrown our name Be the Match.
Yeah.
So for many years, we were known as National Marrow Donor Program, the National Registry, Be the Match, and we
Mhm.
had all these different names out there, and NMDP people were using.
Right.
And we realized that the scope of our work was far beyond just marrow donation. We'd become a global leader in cell therapy, advancing research, facilitating cellular treatments, and supporting patients across more than 75 blood cancers and blood disorders. So we wanted something that would really unify. And the word match really had changed a lot in that previously you needed to be a perfect match, so an 8 out of 8 from an HLA type
Right.
perspective for patients to have great results. Well, that had changed also in that some of the research we had done with our Donor for All program had proven out that a 7 out of 8 and now even a 6 out of 8 provides the same patient outcomes as an 8 out of 8. So the name Be the Match had also really evolved for us. So it was an opportunity to really unify everything under one name. And as we started to look across and look at how a single identity could really help unite our mission,
Yeah.
depending on the audience you talked to, there was a different opinion. Should it be National Marrow Donor Program? Should it Be the Match? Should it be NMDP? And so we really stepped back and polled many different groups. We listened to everybody, and we really thought about who we need to be in the future as we think about driving innovation and research,
Right.
and realize that the name isn't meant to be an acronym. It's really a representation of the entire ecosystem that we impact. So we moved forward. Um, And even though our name has been unified and now everyone using the same name, our mission has always remained the same, which is saving lives through cell therapy.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I actually heard about the HLA. It was the Access trial, right?
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
yeah, which is awesome. And I was super fascinated by that as well. And I think the wording really matters because like as someone who does lung cancer advocacy, like there's a difference between calling someone a smoker and there's a difference between calling someone an individual with a smoking history.
Yeah, you're
And
right.
and this is like a a brand that millions oversee. And so I think NMDP was definitely the right pivot.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah. So,
Thank you.
you spent years researching before making that final call to NMDP. I'm curious, how do you know when you've gathered enough information to make such a big decision? And I think that's something our viewers, young leaders, struggle with.
Well, it's a great leadership question. And really, I think all leaders struggle at times with this. And it's something that we're always looking at is how do you become a better decision maker? And when do you have enough information to move forward? And
Right,
when do you need more information in that particular situation? So I think what's most important is to start with a clearly defined problem. What is the problem you're trying to solve? You have to make sure that that problem is framed so you know what information is really relevant in making the decision. And then, of course, collecting data. And I think ways in which a couple things I would say that are good rules of thumb to stop collecting data and stop kind of being in that
right,
analysis paralysis is if you had additional information, is it likely to change the decision or not?
right.
Um, does the information you have already allow you to evaluate trade-offs with confidence? So again, if you think that any more information isn't going to change the decision, you have enough to really evaluate trade-offs. I think it's time to say that you have enough information. And at that point, a lot of times by delaying a decision actually is a further risk of both momentum or a possible opportunity.
Right. Yeah, that's an amazing perspective in terms of leadership, and I completely agree. I've never had to make such big decisions, but even with the small decisions, I definitely see how that kind of perspective plays into things.
You will
So
someday, no doubt.
yeah, yeah, thank you. So I want to transition the podcast into your journey to becoming CEO. So you joined the organization in 2013 as the chief financial officer, and then you built an entirely new division called biotherapies, and then eventually became the CEO in 2020. And that's such an inspiring path, growing within one organization and rising to lead it. So could you share a bit about what that journey was like and what you learned along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel really blessed to work at an organization like NMDP. I mean, I'll share a little side story here. When I was interviewing for the CFO role, I had a 1 and a 3-year-old, and I was working at an organization that we were working night and day, but it wasn't really moving the world forward. It was providing, I would say, more dollars in the pockets of certain individuals. And I realized if I'm going to be away from my kids this much, I want it to be somewhere that makes a difference and somewhere that I can feel really good about what I do. So it was kind of during that realization that I received a call from an executive recruiter about, at the time, Be the Match, now NMDP, for the CFO role. And as I started the interview process, I just knew this was a place I needed to be at. And unfortunately, I was diagnosed with a very aggressive cancer in the midst of that interview process. And I think most organizations would say, ooh, we don't want to sign someone up who we're not really sure what their next year looks like. And instead, the CEO at the time said, we know you're the right person for this organization from a long-term perspective. And we live our values, we live our mission, and we are all about saving lives, being that hope for patients that are battling cancer, blood cancers, or blood disorders. And we want you to be part of the team. So I think just from a starting point, I knew I was at the right place. And that is so important when you make decisions on where you go to work. Make sure it's about the people you work with, the mission and what you're doing. It truly is true that you won't work another day in your life. But from the CFO perspective, I'm a CPA by training and an accountant finance person by training. And
Yeah.
as a CFO, you're really focused on the financial side, the budgets, the cost, making sure the organization's sustainable. And when you become the CEO, you have to start thinking about things differently from the mission, the people, the culture. What are the things you need to kind of stop doing?
Yeah.
And I think the biggest shift was realizing that although the numbers describe the reality, they don't create it, the people do. And that refocusing of being the one maybe diagnosing the problem to the one that's really shaping belief and making sure the organization's aligned, consistently focusing on what are the most important things that you need to do to make sure that we are all working towards the same goal. And that can be really hard in an organization where you save lives because there's so many amazing ideas out there. And you want to do them all because they could impact somebody's life. And how do you stay really focused on here are the opportunities that are going to impact the most number of lives? Because we all know we can't do everything. We have to stay focused. And so the shift really was about learning new skills and also, I would say, also expanding my identity a bit and showing a lot more humility and patience and vulnerability than I ever had before.
Yeah, yeah, that's super inspiring. Just the shifts and the positions is super inspiring. So when you were building biotherapies, you grew it by 250% in the first year alone, which is incredible. You were basically like kind of building a startup inside a nonprofit. How did that experience of creating something from scratch prepare you to lead the entire organization?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. When you build something from nothing, you feel that full weight of
Yeah,
responsibility, and every decision has such immediate consequences.
right.
There's not a legacy system to go back to, or also to say this is how we've always done it. So it really trained you to kind of test, measure, and expand, and to realize that the most important asset you have in anything is the people and making sure that you have the right people. So I think it was a great muscle to exercise and then to be able to bring to scale, both from the ownership, from focusing on what matters most, to understanding the decisions you make and the impact that they have, not only on the business, but on people. And also being really comfortable with ambiguity, since there is not a roadmap to follow in those cases. And certainly, back in March 2020, there was not a roadmap for any organization to follow. So I think that really helped, again, build some different muscles that were really needed back in March 2020 timeframe.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I can kind of relate. So I actually work with the American Lung Cancer Screening Initiative. We're a national nonprofit. And so while I was a member there, I decided like I was just driving on the highway one day and it's like I just saw a vape, like I saw a billboard about vaping. And so
Oh, yeah.
yeah, and so I was like if we're having billboards about vaping, why not we have billboards about lung cancer screening? And so that's where the entire idea came up. And so I started an initiative within this organization called the National Billboard Project, similar to biotherapies. Obviously not on the same scale, but and so I kind of see where you're coming with in terms of being a founder, but also taking such a huge leadership role.
Yeah, you should be really proud of what you've already accomplished. It's incredibly, incredibly impressive. And certainly my resume did not look like yours at your age.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, my next question is one thing I think about a lot is how relationships change when you move into a leadership role. Like when you became CEO from CFO, some of the people you are now leading used to be your peers. So how did you navigate that?
Yeah, I've been in this situation several times in my career, and I would say the
Yeah.
very first time I was in my late 20s, early 30s when this happened for the first time. And I definitely did not handle it as well as I could have. I've learned a lot over the years. It can be really hard.
Right.
It's you're moving into something. It's something that you can make a greater difference in, whatever the role is that you've moved from. But there's also a loss that happens there. In many cases, my peers have been some of my closest friends too, people that I spend the most time with. And so suddenly you're going from really some of those friendships change. And I think the biggest thing throughout the different times I've done it is to don't pretend that nothing has changed, and
Right.
don't overplay authority either. In most cases, I have the respect of my peers and oftentimes the support for the next role, but also making sure that you're continue that mutual respect stays the same, but also you have to step back and you may not be able to hang out with them quite as much as you used to in different ways. And you have to be okay that maybe you're not getting invited to lunch or maybe you're not getting invited to different things that you used to. And sometimes you do need to be explicit about decision rights, especially if things are changing on what you want to push decisions down or bring them back up. So again, I think it all comes down to communication, and making sure that you're having that really honest, open conversation because it changes for everybody. It's not just the leader. Yeah, and again, accepting that some relationships were going to change permanently, and that can really be the hardest part.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think another thing that's hard about relationships is definitely like working with, people a lot older than yourself. Um, it's like sometimes I don't know when it's mentorship or sometimes when I don't know when it's collaboration, and that's when it becomes hard to
Yeah,
communicate. So yeah, I definitely see what you're saying.
absolutely.
Yeah. So for someone listening who dreams of leading an organization one day, maybe they're in college or early in their career, what skills or experiences should they be building right now? Even if like high level healthcare leadership feels so far away.
Yeah. There's so many, and I've learned
Right.
so much over the years. So I think
Yeah.
I'll give you a handful of things that I think are important. We've already talked about communication,
Yeah.
so important.
Mhm.
99% of the time, a problem that I have in my head, when I
Mhm.
actually have the conversation with someone, it's a completely different path. And if I would have just talked to them right away, I wouldn't have had that in my mind. So I think communication is really important. I also think, especially as we think about healthcare, um, is adaptability and change agility. And it's something that we've started talking about internally quite a bit, AQ, which is adaptability quotient. We hear about IQ and EQ, but in
Mhm.
healthcare especially, there is such rapid change happening right now at paces that we've never experienced in the history, ever before. And so the ability to have that flexibility and change mindset, and it's not to change for the sake of changing, of course, but how do we make sure that we can be proactive. We can kind of shorten that decision time frame. So we talked a little bit about when's enough information. And
Mhm.
we can also then, as leaders, train others to lead without having to have certainty, which can be really hard at times. So communication, building the relationships, and then I think change agility is just so important.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like what you said about AQ. I've actually never heard of AQ. So that's new information for me.
There
Um,
you go.
and I was actually going to ask about how you stay up to the industry, like up to date. And I guess
Yeah.
you kind of just answered that with AQ.
Yes, but I think the other thing from that comment
Yeah.
you just made is I am never the smartest one in the room, ever.
Yeah.
There is always someone that I surround myself who knows really deep certain topics. And so making sure you're surrounding yourselves because there is no way one human being, any leader can keep up with everything going on. So making sure that you're surrounding yourself with people who can do that and then setting that expectation to, keep people up to date and how to think about things is really important.
Yeah, for sure. I always think back to the quotes like you become the person that you surround yourself with. So
Yes.
yeah. So now I'm kind of transitioning. But you lead an organization where, despite everyone's best efforts, like, a single, a wrong, not a wrong, but like a single change or mishap can, kind of change patient outcomes and,
Yeah.
not become the ones that we hope for. So how do you stay resilient and how do you keep your team motivated when, the outcomes aren't always what we expect?
Yeah. So I think it's again being vulnerable, being continuing to align the organization on the impact that you do have. And so if you know where you're going and you have that vision set up, you know how you're going to measure yourself. We all know that something we set today as a plan, a million things are going to happen that you're going to have to change that plan. Um, so how do you keep in mind what that end goal really is? For us, it's how do we ensure by 2028 that we can facilitate 10,000 transplants and of that 3,000 for ethnically diverse patients. So
Wow.
reminding people that you're gonna always have ups and downs throughout that, but to focus on the impact that you have made. Thinking about, when you've gone through a stressful time or to the point that not every patient's outcome is what we hoped for, how do you reframe and think about the patients that you did help? And, you know, this quarter, I'm going to each department and we're talking about that again, just to remind ourselves, what's that? Where are we going? What do we need to stay focused on? And I think also then recognizing that people do have hard days, um, and making sure that we're there for each other and creating a community and a culture that others can lift you up because you're not always going to come to work and have a perfect day either. There's just there's too much reality in the work we do that not every patient's outcome is what we hope for.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think just reflecting, like you said, reflecting back on what you have accomplished is super motivating. I do that a lot. When I don't make a lot of progress with my own work, I just like, oh well, I did this, so
Yep.
here's how it's gonna motivate me to do the
Yeah,
next. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So I'd love to ask you something that's kind of personal to my own journey, if that's okay. Um,
Yes.
one of my long-term dreams is to get super high level healthcare leadership like yourself, and maybe become the United States Surgeon General someday. To serve in a role where I can shape health policy and advocate for patients on a national level. And so you've reached the highest level of healthcare leadership, and I'd be so grateful to hear any advice that you have for someone like me, or like me in my situation, about what it takes to kind of reach those positions and succeed once you get there.
Yeah. So yeah, there's so many, things we've already talked about on
Right.
focusing on communication, surrounding yourself with the right people.
Yeah.
But I'd maybe say three things that as I look back, maybe four as I look back in my career, but we'll
Yeah.
start with one is I think again that surrounding yourself with people who are
Mm.
smarter than you and who think differently than you.
Right.
Um, in so often throughout one's career, you get promoted or you get noticed because of a technical skill, but
Mm.
it's really that emotional intelligence, it's the adaptability quotient that ultimately creates that leadership superpower in you.
Right.
I think again, we talked about this a little bit on that adaptability, but getting really comfortable with being uncomfortable. You are only going to grow, or your likelihood of growth is comes with ambiguity. It comes with mistakes. It comes with moments where you feel um, vulnerability. And don't stop when you have that discomfort. Lean in even more when you feel that discomfort, because it usually means you're on the right path.
Yeah.
And then maybe the last thing I'll say is, and this took me a little while, that leadership isn't an end game. It's not an arrival. It's not, I'm done. It's a
Yeah.
service.
Right.
And oftentimes, the higher you go, it becomes way less about the doing. It becomes less about you, and it's more about the success of everyone around you. And you never get to a point where you stop learning. And so keep learning, keep challenging yourself, care about the people around you, and make sure that you're focused on being a leader and having people follow you than a title or anything else.
Right. Yeah. That's awesome. That definitely makes sense. So I have another question. I read that you recently, I'm not sure if it was recent, but completed a program at Harvard Business School. So even at the CEO level, you're still investing in your own learning. So what does growth look like for someone who's kind of already at the top, and how do you keep getting better?
So again, I think it's that desire to grow and
Mhm.
not looking at just because my title is CEO as I'm done.
Right.
I still have so much growth, and doing something like getting a certificate at Harvard Business School introduced me to so many other CEOs, and I learned so much from them. And I can still pick up the phone and call them if I'm having an issue. And the thing is, in any role, whether it's CEO or Surgeon General or whatever your role is, it
Right.
doesn't stay the same. Today looks very different than it did 5 years ago. And actually, sometimes it's even different from a month ago, as you've got different internal or external challenges. So, to really make sure that you're doing your absolute best, and NMDP deserves that, I need to keep challenging myself to keep growing and making sure that I'm constantly evolving as a leader too.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I think you answered that super well. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah,
Um, so let's get to before we wrap up, I'd love to do a quick lightning round, just some short questions to close us out.
sure.
Um, so what's the best leadership advice you've ever received?
Surround yourself with people way smarter and very different than you.
Okay, perfect. Is there a leadership mistake you made early in your career that ended up teaching you the most?
I thought I had to be the smartest person in the room, and definitely does not need to be the case.
Okay, awesome. So what do you think is the most underrated skill in healthcare leadership, and that's something that people don't talk about enough?
I think change agility, that kind of that adaptability quotient in
Think so, yeah.
healthcare more than any other industry.
Yeah. When you're hiring for senior roles, what do you look for in a candidate?
I mostly look for and I focus on does this candidate's values and who they are and what they prioritize match NMDP's values and what we prioritize?
Right. So like alignment.
hmm
Yeah.
hmm
Awesome. So, and finally, in one sentence, what does great healthcare leadership look like to you?
I think great healthcare leadership is someone who can align an organization, create clarity, trust, and drive results while ensuring that the organization um, feels respect,
Right.
community, and a desire to continue to learn and adapt.
Awesome. Okay, I guess one more last question.
Yeah.
What's one book that you recommend all of us should read?
Um, Gosh, I've read so many.
Yeah.
I can picture it right now. It's got green font and it's changed something, and I think it might be by Michael Porter.
Okay.
But there are some great books out there on change agility, change management. I'd
Yeah.
recommend any of them. There's so many great ones out there.
Okay, perfect. Well, Ms. Ronneberg, I can't thank you enough for this conversation. Your insights, your honesty, and your willingness to share your journey, it means so much to me, and I know it means so much to everyone listening. And honestly, I was kind of speechless that you said yes in the first place. Just interviewing someone like you is just amazing for me. So for anyone tuning in who wants to potentially save a life, please go to nmdp.org and join the registry. It takes just a few minutes to sign up, and you could be the match that saves someone's life. Even if you're under 18, you can pre-register. So thank you again, Ms. Ronneberg, for your generosity and your time. And to everyone listening, thank you for being here.
Thank you, and thank you for everything you do.
Of course, until next time, I'm Sonish, and this has been the Surgeon Sonish Show.